Got on my leather jacket Thriller. The show ain't nothing iller. Man, I'm a lady killer. If I want her, I'ma steal her. I promise I can make her fly away like caterpillars. So if you don't know by now, then you should probably get familiar.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Friday post-election, kind of, sort of, because we don't really have an answer about E1, edition of Ask the Expert. And we are here today with my co-host and partner who is calling from the satellite office, George Passariello. He's from Command Center. Hey, George.
Hey, Leticia. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. And we have a great guest today. He's a guy who is going to help us analyze what is actually going on with the 2020 elections. He's got a big brain and understands everything that's going on. Our dear friend and colleague, Michael Tobman. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be back. And please send me a clip of that introduction so I can send it to my friends and family.
Absolutely. Well, now you have to live up to it. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody, 421 days until Bill de Blasio is out of office. We are counting down, and it doesn't even have to be a messy election to get rid of him. So thank God we're all praying. Okay, so let's get into it. I'm sure everybody wants to know, Michael, what do you think is happening here? We had, 4 years of people thinking that Trump was a fluke and that, there was no way possible that people would vote for him again. Mm-hmm. And we saw polls in 2016 that said that there was no chance he was going to win, and he pulled it out. And then 2020, of course, all the pundits said there's no chance he's going to win. And now we see some of the highest vote tallies we've ever seen in the history of a presidential election. And, he's up near 70 million votes, and Biden is, 72 million votes. And, so how'd they get it wrong, Michael? What happened here?
They, being the pundits, the political class, the chattering class, the pollsters, those that shape so much of the conversation in which the voters make decisions, got it wrong. And they got it wrong because they condescend. They got it wrong because they're convinced of their own righteousness, and they think not only are they smarter than everybody else, but that everybody else is stupid. And we see this writ large across the country. We see this throughout the state, in New York. We see this throughout the city. We're going to spend some time this hour unpacking each of those levels: federal, statewide, probably regional, and then local. But really, they get it wrong because, Secretary Rumsfeld, when he was Secretary of the Defense Department, said, there are the threats we know, there are the known knowns, and then there are the known unknowns, the things we know that we don't know, but then there are the things we don't even know that we don't know. And so many of these folks, the pundits, the chattering classes, the pollsters, can't get their collective minds around that the country is split, and that people could somehow have problems with the President Trump's behavior, personal and business. They could have problems with his policies, and yet still feel that he speaks for them. And the condescension I mentioned is, how could people behave that well? Well, the answer is half the country does. Half of Pennsylvania does. Half of Nevada does. Half of Arizona does. Large parts of the country do. And, they get it wrong. And we've all worked with pollsters, and we do work with marketing and political campaigns. If you don't know where people are, you can't speak to them. And I think a lot of these pollsters and folks who sort of modeled voter behavior didn't understand or couldn't figure out where these voters were coming from. And the last point on this, and then I'll listen more than talk, to your question, is a condescension and an overgeneralization on things like communities of color. So to say that African Americans and communities of color, especially women of color, are the backbone and the foundation of democratic outreach in the party, okay, probably true, but to say that about the Hispanic and Latinx community is wrong. Cuban Americans who have an experience and a family history with the failures of socialism supported President Trump. Venezuelan immigrants who have been struggling with a country that used to be oil rich and now can't afford to feed itself know that that's wrong and supported President Trump. So, they got it wrong at 16 and they got it wrong again. And I guess we're going to spend some time unpacking whether that was avoidable or not.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge an old friend joined us today who hasn't joined us before, Billy Hind. Hi, Billy. Billy, I met Billy on work in cleaning up after Hurricane Sandy. So it's great to have you with us, Billy. Thanks for joining in the show. For everybody else, please like and share the show. Let's bring some people in because I'm sure you have lots of questions for Mike and maybe some commentary as well. And we'd like to be able to get to you. So like and share and invite others to be part of the program. That's how we get information out and that's how we get perspectives. So Mike, the thing you said was that they condescend. And, one thing for me about Trump was, I was a Pataki supporter and then I was a Marco Rubio supporter. But, and I've known Donald Trump in New York politics, as we all have. And so, I wasn't really sure where he was going when this all started, but I had my loyalties to Pataki and to Rubio for other reasons, not anything against Trump, but for that. But what I noticed, and I wrote in 2015, I wrote an op-ed for the Advance that said that, he was starting to really people were gravitating to him. And I was recognizing that the reason that they were gravitating to him was because he was willing to be outrageous. Mm-hmm. He was willing to say the things that we were all thinking and that we'd only say behind our keyboard in Facebook and Twitter. But he was bringing those words to life on the biggest stage that there is. And for me, as time went on, I kind of look at Donald Trump as the guy that was standing there saying, hey, you guys, the emperor doesn't have any clothes. And what do I mean by that? We have been, we Americans, grumble and grouse about how we, hate government. We don't trust our government, right? We don't trust the process. We don't like what it does. We don't like media. We don't like a lot of things. But yet, every time it comes to election time, we put the same people back in office because those people, we know them. They're local and they're our friends. And I think that what Trump did was he said, all the things you've ever been thinking about the government is true. There's a culture in Washington that you don't know about, things that happen. And he played into that, that anger that we had. Mm-hmm. And that's how he got elected the first time. And then he kept that going. And that's how he got elected the second. That's why we see so many votes the second time. But the thing that I think was interesting about Trump was that he did things in plain sight that politicos do under the table, and that we complain about people doing under the table. But he did them all in plain sight, and he didn't apologize for them.
Voters, I've always said, and I get a lot of pushback on this, that voters are high information voters and that they make decisions based on their understanding and where they get their news, whether it's MSNBC or Fox or CNN or the Post or the Times or the News or Orlando Sentinel or the Syracuse Post-Standard, the Chicago Tribune, or however they absorb it, social media, Facebook, Twitter. They vote based on information, but they also vote based on emotion. And Trump tapped into a level of resentment of the thinning middle class and shifts in demographics and feelings of control and place that vast parts of the country, half the country in 2016 and half the country in 2020, felt and are still feeling. And where the Democratic Party failed in 2016, but it looks like got it a little more right than not in 2020, was in addressing those concerns while still maintaining a very fractured base of their own radical left and moderate Democrats. And perhaps Biden was the one to do that and uniquely positioned to do it. But Trump has been wholly himself from 2016 until now. And Democrats who think that they can highlight his outrageousness and his behavior. And, everybody knows who he is. They knew who he was in 2016 and voted for him, and they know who he is in 2020, and many people voted for him again. And I think support the president or not, support Trump or not, there are very, very important, support Biden or Trump, regardless, whomever, there are very important lessons here. There are important lessons for how we understand the country moving forward. Nationally, there are important lessons to be learned for New York, and I think there are critical lessons to be learned for next year's mayoral election, looking at the sign behind you about how many days until de Blasio is out. And it would be a real shame to go through 2016 and to go through 2020 and to go through what we're doing now and not learn from and build off of those lessons. And those lessons are, don't condescend, build coalitions of people who perhaps otherwise wouldn't work together, and find a way to campaign without insulting the voters. Because as we saw in the Malliotakis race, which I know the two of you were incredibly instrumental in, and congratulations, is that when Max Rose decided to was losing his cool and started insulting the voters, it was no different than Elliot Engel saying, if I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care about this. Well, Elliot, there's an easy way to fix that. You're not going to get reelected. So, after the heat is out of this a little bit and the chattering classes go on their vacations and everybody chills out a little, I think we really need to unpack what these lessons are and how they can be applied to governing. Remember governing? All anybody talks about is campaigning. Let's talk about governing in what I focused on: housing policy, law enforcement, public safety, education, economic development, smart development. Let's actually get down to work.
I think, and Judge, I know you want to chime in here, and I just want to say this. I think that for me, what I'm seeing, and of course we haven't unpacked everything, right? Because there's lots of questions. I know that there's plenty of people out there that are wondering, like Wisconsin has more votes than there are voters registered in the state. And there's a couple of states like that, and even though they are same-day registration, people want to know how can 100% plus another couple 100,000 come out, all at one time. There's lots of questions going on, and some people say that Trump, got us ready for this, or was setting us up, when he said he didn't trust the mail-in ballots and all this, that Trump created the suspicion. But I don't agree with that. I think that the suspicion was there. Once again, everything Trump says and does is almost a reflection of what a large part of America feels. But it feels to me that this is about the people that trust the government, trust their government and want a larger government, and the people that don't want a larger government, that don't trust the government. Instead of voting in blocks, it feels to me that it really is a sentiment about how much we want government involved in our lives, and whether people were black or Hispanic or whatever. I mean, each of the minority votes grew for Trump as it stands right now, especially the black vote, they're saying. So, could it be that we're changing the way we vote? We're not voting with identity anymore, or the identity we're voting with is more about our pocketbooks and what happened and what we have and what we want to keep, rather than the people like me, that came from the same place as us.
Moderates, hopefully out of this, it's not you're not you're not in the shadows as a moderate. I think we've become so divisive with the way that people talk to each other, that we're not being in tune with the fact that these laws and these restrictions that you're after can turn around and bite you in the ass. We just, as a Republican, as a moderate, I want to help people. I want to make sure my taxes are low. I want to make sure that we have a good, safe place to live. These are all normal things everyone wants, right? But for some reason, that's become the dark side. If you're a Christian, it's okay to bash Christians all of a sudden, but don't bash a Muslim. That's racist. So you have to practice what you preach, and hopefully, out of this, we find more people acting that way, and I think we'll all be better off in the end. I know that was a big rant, but
No,
moderates need to rise.
It wasn't a rant. I think, again, folks have to be, and by folks I mean in the aggregate, pundits, political class, the candidates, and voters, certainly public officials, have to be self-aware enough, and I know we're asking a lot for elected officials and politicians to be self-aware, but to be self-aware enough to hear what the voters are saying in how they're behaving, to George's point, and how they're voting. And I keep coming back to, it would be a shame to not learn those lessons. And, I have 2 teenagers. I know folks raise kids. I always say to them, it's not what you say sometimes, it's how you say it. And, for Democrats, whether it's the Clintons and the Obama administration, or the Susan Powers and Samantha Rices of the world, Susan Rice and Samantha Power, and Biden and Harris, to understand that the policies they may want to pursue, and that they get through the Senate, whether a Republican Senate or a Democratic U.S. Senate, have to be presented and couched in terms of helping people in their regular work-a-day, personal and professional lives. And it's not like, I'm from the federal government, I'm here to help, and oh, you're a racist, you're a misogynist, you're a sexist, you're opposed to LGBTQ, you're opposed to marriage equality. Just focus on pocketbook issues. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about business reopening. Let's talk about all the things voters show they cared about, and not say to the voters, communities, whether communities of color, to George's point or not, you're wrong, we're right, you need to listen to me. That's a recipe for disaster. It really,
nobody wants to be where that lands. I promise you.
It's a real shame. And I hope, now, wouldn't it be interesting? Look, I worked for Senator Schumer from 01 to 05. I have a certain bias and perspective in terms of his success and his leadership. But wouldn't it be interesting in a Republican U.S. Senate if Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and Senator Tillis, if he wins that re-election in North Carolina, and Joni Ernst in Iowa, are the statesmen and stateswomen who have nothing left to prove? They won re-election in the most heated and partisan of years. They have nothing left to prove, and perhaps they are the ones who could bring us back to the center right and to the middle.
I think that would be fantastic. My concern is that even watching the counts, even watching what's going on, listening to, these talking heads reprimand us. I mean, I can't remember her name, but one of the women on The View, actually said that if you voted for Donald Trump, you are selfish. Now, I mean,
right.
And it goes back to what you said before, condescending. I mean, it's almost as if the media doesn't understand, the politicians don't understand that without us, they're nothing. And it's not their job to make us into their image, but it is their job to entertain us. In the case of government, it's their job to serve us. And it flipped somewhere where it became that we are there to serve government, and we are wrong if we don't feel this way or do this way or give this much, or don't you care about the poor kids here or the poor people here, to the extent that literally we're working 2 jobs because the hand is in our pocket. So
you have to. I so agree. You have to find people, voters, people, colleagues, loved ones, relationships. You have to find them where they are and you can't make them be something they're not, and then try and have a conversation where you're then asking for their vote. You have to find people where they are. And if we all had, great grandparents and grandparents and great aunts and uncles who used salty language, who had casual racism and casual sexism, and every time they opened their mouth, you cringed a little and you thought, oh, grandma, really?
Yeah.
But when did we go away from grandma, you can't say that to grandma, you're evil, you're wrong,
Right.
and I don't want to have a relationship with you.
Right.
It's not, there was
It's just divisive.
years ago
It's the divide.
where Anthony Jr. comes home with a Hispanic girlfriend, and Tony and Carmela look at each other and say, well, at least she's Catholic. Well, find places of aligned interest and find places to agree, find ways to say yes. You've got to find people where they are. And Leticia, your point was so well considered in that the pundits and the chattering classes and the reporters want people to be a certain way rather than looking how they really are and saying, okay, this is what the country is. I think but perhaps we have an opportunity now when the air will be a little clearer to move closer to that.
Well, do you think that the air will be clearer? And before you answer the question, let me just say hi to my mom, Josephine, who joined us. And
Josephine.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Okay, well, Jim Alfano has a comment here. There are 2.7 billion Facebook users and only 321 million people in the USA. Ask Google. So why don't we have a national online voting system which would prevent fraud and give instant, accurate results? Now, that's where I was going to go, Michael, with this. I mean, it cannot be helpful that the Pennsylvania, just the certain county boards of elections, decided that they were going to play games with allowing people to watch, not watch. This many feet. What do I mean by playing games? We both have been to the Board of Elections in Brooklyn and Staten Island. We're all over the place, and we know that each one has two heads. And even in polling sites, the difference between one polling site and another. Mm-hmm. You might have one coordinator who is going to be very pleasant and let you be a poll watcher and have no problem with you wherever you are. And then you go to another polling site, and the next thing you know is you're being asked for all kinds of ID, and you're told you have to stand a certain place and do a certain thing because they feel the power of their office and they feel that they must give you a hard time. So it seems to me that I won't accuse all of Pennsylvania. It seems to me that in one or two particular counties, there was an issue about poll watchers being able to actually see the ballots and what was going on. And I wonder if these watchers realize that they are feeding into the suspicion that so many people had already going into this with all the paper ballot. I mean, it's not helping. It's not helping the count. It's not helping us know. It's not helping us feel comfortable about the count. It's not helping us feel comfortable about the huge jump in voter registration in certain states. It's not helping us feel comfortable about the election. And so I fear, Michael, that we are going to have a situation here where half of the voting country is going to feel like this election was stolen from them in a worse way than the half of the country felt because they had the popular vote, for Hillary, but she didn't win the election. Right. And I think that we both remember 2000 when that was a tough one because that was the incoming president's brother that was in control of that state's board of elections. So we've certainly been here before, but I think never with the amount of suspicion and distrust and mistrust that we have right now. And I wonder if it will ever sit well that this election was won fairly or not. And I wonder even if Donald Trump himself said it was won fairly, it's okay, I concede, if this nation is going to be able to recover and accept this election.
When elections are close, as it was in 2000, as it was in 16, as it was Tuesday, now, today, tomorrow, that is going to be a problem. To your initial question and point about the boards of elections, state by state, county by county, polling site by polling site, that presupposes, Leticia, that the people we're talking about, the election commissioners, the secretaries of state, the members of each board of election, and the poll watchers care about the concern you just raised. It's a legitimate concern. It's a real concern. They don't care because they're protecting their fiefdoms. They're protecting their prerogatives. They're protecting, now at the federal state level, state prerogatives. We have a federalist system. I get that. But at the hyper local level, they don't care. But in the middle of the Vietnam conflict, with the country torn apart by protests on college campuses, President Nixon was overwhelmingly reelected. President Reagan was overwhelmingly reelected in 1984. We talked about this at Elephant in the Room the other week with 49 out of 50 states. No one was saying that was an unfair election because it was a blowout. But when elections are this contested and this split, yes, there are problems. Now, when memory sticks magically appear days after the election or bundles of absentee ballots are found in drop ceilings, yeah, we have issues that need to be addressed aggressively. We have issues that need to be addressed in the courts. That's a whole different situation.
These aren't new issues, right? I mean, these are...
They're not. Generally, they don't matter when elections are what they are, but when they're this close, But again, we see it as a problem. Regular people see it as a problem. Common sense suggests it's a problem. I'm telling you, Board of Election Commissioners don't see it's a problem because it's their problem.
Yeah. So Jamie Ann is asking, is it true that Max Rose is contesting his election as well, or is that another rumor? Jamie Ann, the answer is that the election is it's not being contested. There was an injunction put on the paper in the election because there was more paper cast than the difference between Max Rose and Nicole Maliotakis in votes. And so when that happens, it is tradition that you do an injunction to stop everything. Don't open the ballot. And this is in New York. Every state has different rules, Jamie Ann. So in New York, when an election looks like it can't be decided right away, or when it gets close like that, an injunction is ordered, and that means stop everything. That means you seal the machines, you don't open any paper, and you have to wait. You have to go for a hearing, and the lawyers now will be present. And what will happen is all the machines will be recanvassed for both Brooklyn and Staten Island, and then when it comes time to open the paper ballots, they have to be able to. Both sides have to be able to examine the exterior envelope, the interior envelope before the ballot is opened. And then they have to agree or disagree on whether or not the ballot itself should be opened. And that's called a challenge. And we have the ability to challenge voters even when they're going in a booth in New York. If you believe that a person is not actually registered or who they say they are, the poll watchers can actually challenge. Our system gives the voter and the American voter a lot of rights to protect their vote. We just don't always use them. But what's going to happen with the Max Rose, Nicole Maliotakis situation is next week sometime. The lawyers will go in and start to count the paper. Now, there's about 50,000 pieces of paper. And so it's going to take a long time to count those ballots, but they will all be counted, or in some cases, if they're found to be ineligible, they'll be thrown out.
But he has to get almost all of those votes, or 89% or something like that of those votes, right, to win?
Statistically, it should be impossible for him to win, but this is 2020, and so
What do you mean?
Statistics and facts cease to exist in 2020, I think. So,
I detected some sarcasm in your tone. I'm not an expert.
So Jim wants to know, why are computers used to micromanage and not used for what they were designed to do, such as accurately count votes? So Michael, do you see us? Jody Wasserman says, are we headed for disaster?
I'll speak to Jody. Yes, Jody, obviously it's all up to a higher power. But I would say, I am a proud graduate of the University at Albany. I have my mug right over here. From noon to 1, we were having a panel discussion with some university professors and folks talking about the history of presidential elections, especially contested ones. Let's remember Vietnam, a civil war, cross of gold speech, right? Gold standard, fiscal policy, Great Depression, Great Recession of '08, Civil War. I said, that we have been here before. We are not doomed, but before we didn't have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or 24-hour live TV, but we had versions of that then. Partisan newspapers, like the Times and the Post, versions of that today. It just seems louder, it seems worse, and it's happening to us. It's not history, so we're going to feel strongly about it. But to the question about why aren't we using computers for what they could do, which ultimately is count correctly, I actually agree. But to Leticia's earlier point on the question about computers, and I've lost years of my life at the Board of Elections doing these challenges and these recounts and everything. These are closed systems, right? These are systems that until the very end where they are uploading data and sending it to the board for the final count, the count itself is done in a closed system that is not available to outside networks and et cetera. So until we have foolproof, fail-proof, impenetrable ballot security, I'm uncomfortable, and I see George shaking his head. No, but I'm a little uncomfortable having stuff that can be hacked.
I'm with you. I've been in technology most of my life. You cannot trust that it cannot be altered, manipulated in mass easily in our lifetimes. You will not see that level of security available to us. Not for an election, anyway, in my opinion. And I'm a technologist.
But I don't understand that, George and Mike, because here's the thing. Every aspect of our life is computerized, right? I mean, our finances, we don't even use money anymore. I mean, it's true. I mean, we're now, digitally paying for things, and our credit cards are online, and we're, in public places with Wi-Fi and all of this. We send people to Mars, which is where George sounds like he's at the space station today. We have such great technology and we're protected, we're encrypted, we are, we put our whole wealth, our health care, everything on files, but we don't want to use technology to check the greatest thing that we have in America, our vote.
Well,
I don't understand that.
We did apply a level of technology to balloting and voting, right? It's much faster, although in some states, apparently, they must have an abacus and a rock. It's a lot faster these days because we have the ballot readers, right? And those are isolated machines, and those are vulnerable. Those are not safe from being hacked. They're ultra. It's a degree of safety. They're 98% safe, right? But you'll never see the day where a human can implement the system that another human can't manipulate. No matter how sophisticated, the reason why banking works is because and believe me, there's billions of dollars in online fraud every year. It's just a lot cheaper than mailing out checks and stuff like that. So at the end of the day, it offsets, but it's still, the fraud's still there. You're just protected from it through some sort of actuarial formula.
This is going to be a ongoing conversation that there's no perfect answer to, because again, it's state by state, and a presidential election is a popular vote. Who got more votes in the aggregate? But a presidential election is really, a whole bunch of local elections,
Right.
and with its own rules and procedures, which I think is a good segue to talk about what happened in New York, not just the Maliotakis race.
Yeah, let's talk about why let's talk about the interesting situation here, because we see that if everything continues to go the way it is, Biden wins, Trump loses. But they didn't pick. It didn't become a big blue wave like they expected it was going to become, right? So the Congress didn't flip, and the question is whether the Senate will flip. But there should, if everything was going to be a blue wave, we should have already flipped. So what do you think that's about, Michael? I mean, because it happened all over the state. It's not just in Staten Island. It looked more like a red wave than a blue wave.
It was Democratic talking points, Democratic candidates, Democratic narrative got captured by the more radical left. Suburban families, and not just suburban families, Brooklyn, Staten Island, the whole corridor from for those of who are watching who are local, let's say, from McDonald Avenue to Flatbush Avenue, from Prospect Park to the water, they don't want to hear about defund the police. They don't want to hear about economic policies that make no sense. They don't want to hear about apartment buildings where people cannot pay their rent for 12 months and have it be consequence free. They don't want to hear about how they're targeting yeshivas and Catholic schools for unfair regulations. And then in the suburbs, they don't want to hear about police being vilified and public safety and bail reform and witnesses being killed and violent crimes in Suffolk County. In some ways, I keep coming back to the geniuses, air quotes, who came up with a Democratic strategy on the state Senate side and some of these congressional races think that voters are stupid and they condescend to them. And they think, no, well, when we say defund police, we don't mean it, because I'm going to stand up in conference and say we shouldn't do that. So long as the state Senate Democratic Conference is being driven by the radical left and moderate Democrats who speak in conference and say, maybe this isn't a great idea politically and policy-wise, while everyone else is then tweeting out to the activists so they can protest at their district offices, voters aren't stupid. Their attitude is, we don't need you. I don't need you to say something that you're not going to do. I don't need you to lie to me. So whether it was central New York or state Senate races in Long Island or southern Brooklyn or Staten Island, there are consequences. Words have consequences. Policies have consequences. You want to take $1 billion away from the police. You want to shut down the anti-crime and anti-gun unit. There's going to be a spike in gun violence. This is not a difficult thing. I'm not great at algebra, but I could figure that one out.
You don't have to be a math expert for that.
So what happened? People understood that it didn't make sense, and that all things being equal, they will choose a different path. And New York is a vast state. It is a huge state of diverse regions. And the idea that there's an upstate downstate divide is BS, because upstate overgeneralizes and simplifies. It's the North Country, the capital region, the southern tier, central New York, and western New York. And then Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk County, being a Pataki person, you remember, Nassau and Suffolk County in general elections is about 17-18% of the general election vote. You tell me that because it's below a certain point that Long Island is downstate? No, Long Island is Long Island. And it used to be the Long Island Nine. All the seats out there were Republican. Now, at one point they became mostly, if not all, Democratic. Now there's going to be that balance. And it comes back to balance. So whether it's Staten Island, southern Brooklyn, Long Island, Rockland County, the Hudson Valley, Catskills, or other parts of New York, voters get it. They really get it.
So we're joined by Tony Herbert has joined us, and so has Mark Deadeyes. Tony, they're having a little side conversation here in comments about whether or not they like Trump, and Trump should have. Jody says Trump should have kept his mouth shut, and they're talking about the woman who spit in the cop's face and called him a fascist. Should have been thrown in jail. Never let out, and Tony Herbert says he agrees. So we're seeing on our side comments here, Mike, that exactly what you were saying is that while people may not agree at the top of the ticket with who should lead America, that for the local issues, people have a real problem with, I guess you would say, the more progressive agenda. And I think that we, certain news stations actually covered a Zoom call that was done in the Congress with some congressional members who were actually scolding Nancy Pelosi for embracing the squad and that very progressive agenda, and saying that that's the reason that they didn't pick up seats. So having said that, okay, so again, disconnect, right? Because in the 2018 way, the state Senate turned blue. And so now we had a blue Senate, a blue Assembly, and we had, we had a governor who was once a moderate who was turning more and more progressive. And they passed bills, like at rapid fire, including bail reform and late term abortion and other bills that they've been waiting to get through that there were resistance to for years and years and years. Now we see that people said, you made a mistake, Senate and Governor, because we didn't want, the reason that those bills lagged was because we, the people, didn't want them passed. And so now we see Vito Bruno, possibly taking a seat. We see the Senate, we see the 46th Assembly maybe picking up a seat, and you see things turning red. So do you think that those who have now gone into office can convince those that are there already, that came in with the blue wave, that we have to move towards a middle ground here? We can't be so severe either to the right or the left, because people are not comfortable with that into those agenda items.
Democrats especially have a very difficult time understanding or accepting or embracing that they could win a war and still lean back and cede certain battles. And, watching the Malliotakis Rose debate on New York One, I thought she wiped the floor with him. And he went to this rally where they held up signs with vile things and coarse language and defund the police. And not that I would ever, but if I was advising him, I'd say, why did you go to that thing? Don't go. Right? You know how you avoid the situation of being called out on that? Don't go. But they can't not go in their mind, because they're all terrified of a primary from their left. So,
and at least balance it by going to one of the police.
Well, that requires a level of thoughtfulness and self-awareness and introspection and moderation that they seem incapable of. And I think the I'm not going to get into it, but the Democratic Socialists and the radical left and the Democratic Party are the tail wagging the larger Democratic dog, and they will go down in their self-referential, pseudo-bohemian, groupthink pods, never acknowledging that other people may have ideas that are worth considering and may be right. And how many times have the three of us said to clients, candidates, corporate clients, do you want to say what you're thinking right now? Do you want to say that, or do you want to win? Because you can't do both.
Right.
More times than I can count.
Foreign administration and foreign policy, and we talked about this when I was on in the summer. Do you want to normalize relations with Cuba, or do you want to win Florida? You can't do both. Right? Do you want to defund police, or do you want to win Southern Brooklyn? You can't do both. Right? Do you want to insult the voters, or do you want to do well on the South Shore of Staten Island? You can't do both. I understand that. You understand that, but it seems to escape people who are otherwise, I don't know, literate. I can't figure it out.
It goes back to what you were saying before, is know your voter, know where they are. And I think that if we're going to talk about Gonarnis and Bruno and Rose and Malliotakis, what's painfully obvious to me is that neither Rose nor Gonarnis understood their voter. They both came in as moderates, right? They both said, here, I'm moderate, in the 2018 blue wave. They painted themselves as moderate and said that they could work on both sides of the aisle. Yet both of them wound up doing things that would be considered anything than moderate, including Gennarda's voting for bail reform and then Max Rose, marching in this defund the police, or in this protest, peaceful protest, he called it. But what in all through the campaign, Mike, all through the campaign, I'm going to go back to Max Rose. He said, it was a peaceful protest. It wasn't about defunding the police. It was about,
Then rename this effort, please, someone.
Yeah, but in his concession speech, he went right back to it and said, I don't regret doing it, and I did it, and he started talking about it all over again.
We talked about this at Elephant in the Room the other week at the meeting in Staten Island. All you need to do is look at that Max Rose, Nicole Malliotakis, New York 1 debate. Nicole's backdrop was a flag and a banner, was her campaign banner. And Max Rose's was a bookshelf with a service flag and a glass case. God bless, I respect the service. I thank him for his service. He's a vet. I don't think anybody would criticize or pinch on that. But it was a bookcase. So who was that backdrop for? It was for the chattering classes. It was for his friends on Twitter. It was for the folks who said, "Oh, I see you have a copy of Robert Caro's The Power Broker."
Yeah.
Virtue signaling again,
Well, what are you doing that? Put a banner up with your name on it. Maybe some people still don't know who you are. Have your name there. Nicole.
Well, the whole thing is, what I don't understand is he got swept in 2018, right, in that blue wave. Nobody knew him. He wasn't from Staten Island. He was from Park Slope. And before that, he was in the military, so he really wasn't around.
That was a brutal year. We were all there. We worked on Marty Golden's campaign. That was heartbreaking. Once you get in, however you get in, he couldn't find a way, number sticking, we hope, to stay in because he insulted the voters, and he couldn't and wouldn't find them where they are.
And Mike, the one thing, though, is, and George, is that he never reminded the voters who he was. He was only in for 2 years. He didn't have a lot under his belt. Shouldn't the first campaign ad that he put out be, "Hey, remember me? I'm Max Rose. You voted for me 2 years ago, and this is what I did for you"? Instead, he came out slugging against Nicole Malliotakis, who the district knew for 10 years and who was elected 5 times in her own district, and maybe at least all of the district voted for once, and he started bashing her. So in other words, calling the voters an idiot because she was a fake, phony, and fraud, and you were stupid enough to vote for her.
All right, George, go ahead.
Yeah. She's here 10 years running an office, and everybody here, whether they like her or they don't like her, know who she is, and have heard her when she's like a pit bull. She's been screaming about taxes almost her entire career. Whatever genius on that side decided to say, "Let me attack her on taxes," did not know Staten Island. Because we know Nicole. I hated Nicole, but she fought for lower property tax.
I'm taking this call from my office, Look how old I am. I'm doing this StreamYard from my office at the Rent Stabilization Association. So we are the trade association that represents the owners and managers of stabilized housing in New York City, Long Island, and Westchester. And we have market rate folks in our portfolio as well. We have 26,000 members that between them own and run over 1 million apartments in New York City. So our tagline, "We House New York," is sincere and real. So RSA, unique among trade associations in the real estate industry, take principled stands, ideological stands, that issues that benefit our members and property owners is where we are, and we don't compromise on that. We'll talk about other issues, we'll meet with other people, but we understand that when a Democratic state senator, as moderate as they may be, goes into conference and says, "Guys, what you're doing is starving property owners and eliminating their ability to invest in their buildings, and we're going to return to the 70s and early 80s in New York City," that their voice is going to be drowned out, that they're going to be called compromised and evil and racist. And what's the point? So we stick to our guns, and then the times catch up with us. The pendulum does swing back. And RSA is unique in that way, and I'm very proud to be a part of it. But you see the same thing with law enforcement unions. They didn't compromise. They didn't move on this. They're not going to they're not going to support those who say police are evil and that the police department should be defunded, because they understand the consequences of eliminating the ability to have professional, responsible law enforcement. And the Democratic Party bringing this back to our earlier point in the wake of that horrific George Floyd murder. What happened was a tragedy. What happened was wrong, evil, and shouldn't have happened. But should it give rise to defund police? Should it give rise to vilifying police? And by the way, the police department in New York City is deeply, deeply diverse, right? So again, all of these things are connected, and you have to find a way to find everybody where they are and speak to them and have productive conversations. And looking at 2021 for the mayoral race and for the various borough president races around the city, the winning candidate in any of those races is going to be the one who could assemble a coalition, as uneasy as that coalition may be at times, that speaks to those who the Democratic Party has repudiated, right? And everybody else. So whoever's going to win for mayor is the one that's going to be able to get Staten Island, Southern Brooklyn, parts of Queens, parts of the Bronx, and a portion of the moderate left Democratic Party that feels alienated by the radicals. That's a tough one. And you can't build that coalition from the far left. You have to build it from somewhere in the middle.
I agree with that. So I don't know if I said we were joined by Gina Marie. Gina Marie, it was something that she said, and it was what we were speaking to earlier, Michael, that she felt like the election was rigged. And Gina Marie is a young mom, and she's a small business owner. And here's her comment. She feels like her vote or her choice was stolen. And that is, I hear this over and over and over again from people who voted for Trump, who felt like that enough people voted for Trump that he not only should have won the election, but also that President Trump was treated unfairly in his 4 years in office. And we all know that 95% of all press for Donald Trump was negative. And so there was a skewing. We know that to be true. But the side effect of what the media did, the side effect of what some Washington insiders or elitists have done, they thought that they were doing God's work in their own mind, that they were skewering Donald Trump. But what they didn't realize was that the side effect of that, or what was the left after they skewered him, is this: a young mother of, I think it's 3 children, small business entrepreneur, lovely woman, patriot, somebody who wants to work hard, a proud American, now does not believe in her government or the system by which we elect presidents. That is, for me,
it's a shame.
Scary and sad.
And let me say, Gina, because I saw your Facebook profile picture came up next to your name. Your children are beautiful, and you have a lot to be proud of. Look, being in New York in a presidential election, it's difficult to feel as if your voice is heard in that situation in a way it would be in Pennsylvania or Ohio or Nevada or Arizona. Yes, the antidote to that is to get involved at a more local level. Be involved in congressional campaigns, be involved in borough president, be involved in state senate races, be involved in the next gubernatorial campaign. That is empowering, and that changes the conversation and shifts it in a way. I've said this before. I say it to clients. I've said it on TV. I'm saying it now. You tell big stories by telling a lot of little stories. And a lot of little stories, not little to be diminutive, but a little meaning city council races, borough president, state senate, Congress, governor, mayor, enough of those build up and you shift the conversation nationally and regionally. And, I have to say also, enormous credit is due, and we probably should have said this at the beginning of the hour, to political leadership who saw the writing on the wall and figured out that though it would be difficult at the beginning, but it would gain steam, that candidates needed to be recruited and campaigns needed to be professionally run. People like Jerry Kassar, the chairman of the state conservative party, people like Teddy Gora, chairman of the Brooklyn GOP, friends like Nick Langworthy, the head of the state GOP, and our friend, the chairman of the Staten Island Republican Party,
Brendan Lantry, my
who this is not easy work. It's not easy work, and beyond not easy, it's expensive, and it is
soul sucking. Is that a bad word to use?
soul sucking.
Yeah.
He said soul sucking.
It's a hard job.
I was thinking that.
Really
I was
hard job.
deadening, but it when you win, no one looks back at the hard work and the frustration and the fundraising. They just see that you had a vision and you got it done, and wow, wasn't that great? But there's a time when it is very lonely work, and it's a time where you're meeting people at restaurants and on Zoom calls and meeting them for a beer, meeting them for a coffee, and you're doing it one by one by one, and you do that 1,000 times. And then you look back and you realize you have an army of followers. And at one point early on, there were just 3 or 4 people in the room, and George, it was you, Leticia, it was you, and it was Jerry, and it was Nick, it was Brendan, and it was Teddy. So really enormous credit is due to that leadership, without which it's almost impossible to get done. And here we are counting votes to make sure that it sticks because it got done.
I think that's a fantastic answer. And Gina Marie, guess what? I'm running for borough president. No matter what happens in the presidential election, you know me a long time, and what Michael just said is absolutely correct. You start small and you grow, and the spirit that we have and that we feel, under the Trump administration, it could be replicated. It is here in Staten Island. It shouldn't go away. If it turns out that Donald Trump's not the president anymore, we can't just crumble. What good would it do? We learned so much. So many new people came into the party. We need to get hold of them, and we need to get another focus and keep our message going forward. And that's how we change government, and that's how we break down the swamp, and that's how we change Washington. Little steps. And I appreciate what you said, Michael, because that's what we did in the Republican Party when I was chair. We were supposed to lose after Rudy Giuliani was out. I took over because the outgoing chairwoman said that, realized that there would never be another Republican mayor of New York City, she thought. And so I wound up taking over for her because Governor Pataki asked me to. And then all of a sudden I found myself in a breakfast meeting with none other than Michael Bloomberg telling me he was thinking about running. And I said right then and there, you know what? And I said it to him. You may not think you could win, but if the sun and the moon and the stars all align, you can. And sure enough, not that I'd wish it ever to happen again, but 9/11 terrorist attacks occurred, and suddenly people wanted to feel safe, and they wanted law and order, and they wanted security, and so they looked to the Republican candidate, and that was Michael Bloomberg, and that's how he won re-election. And even though we weren't supposed to win any other election, we continued to go on and win and win and win in the Republican Party from 1999 and forward. And I was fortunate to be the chairman then, but I was supposed to be very lonely. When I took over the party, there was 200 people in it. And when I left, there were 850 people in it. And so, Gina, stay with it. And for anybody out there that's feeling that their candidate didn't win and that their government let them down or the system let them down, do what Michael said. Get involved locally. Keep that spirit on fire in you and keep it going. And that's how you change things. So I know that was speechifying, but it was campaigning too. Lisa Latanzio Price has said, I have lost all faith in the government. I have voted for the last time. Lisa, I hope that's not so. I hope you'll listen to what Michael said and, take a breath and take a break, and we'll start over. Okay, Michael, now let's just go to 2021. So, as I said, right, Rudy Giuliani, supposedly no chance for him to win, but he did win. after all the riots and whatnot. In 2001, Bloomberg supposedly had no shot at winning, but he won. Do you see the ability for a Republican to possibly get into office again in 2021 in New York City?
I think the focus of everybody's effort should be in working to promote and to elect a moderate mayor who can win. And right now, that appears to be a Democrat. I think that for Staten Island Borough President, I think for city council races, I think looking ahead to 2022 for state senate races, you build a bench of folks that can move forward and create balance in government. Is where it is. I'm not. Look, I don't lie. Sometimes I don't answer the question. Sometimes I don't answer the question. Sometimes I answer the question I want to have been asked instead of the one that was. But no, in this case, I think everybody's best efforts should be focused on electing, getting a moderate through the Democratic primary process, and then let's see where we are for November 2021. I think the radical left there are too many candidates tacking left. They're not going to learn the lessons of 2020 and 2016. And that's just where I am. Look, I'm wrong more often than I'm right. But
I mean, they're going to take a look at what's happening in the Senate, and the Congress looks like it's going to pick up some seats, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it'd be astounding to me if they didn't wake up, so to speak, because that's the sickle and the devil guy knocking on your door. Why ignore it?
They can't do it. They won't learn. They're going to insist on policies, and then they're going to throw their hands up and say, "Why did this happen?" It's always like de Blasio. And I know dear friends of ours in law enforcement and here in housing policy, and I love Leticia. You've written about this in the Advance, and I saw you had an editorial in the New York Post. It's always somebody else's fault with these people, and no, they're not going to learn. They are constitutionally and temperamentally, and they just can't do it. They can't do it. And hey, God bless, right? So, we have new assembly members coming in. That I think that the floor of the state assembly is going to be very different in terms of debate. I think I know Congresswoman-elect Malliotakis was a leader in the Assembly Minority Conference in terms of debates. And I remember the story that she told me, and she told you, and she told the Post, she told the News, that she knew who Shelley was, and she had Speaker Silver's number from day one. And she would not let go of that. And she debated on the floor again and again and again until Assemblywoman Deborah Glick came up to her and warned her and said, "You keep doing this, something's going to happen to you. You're going to get hurt." And she thought, threatening me? What? And ultimately, Nicole was right. Nicole was right about all of it. And I think we're going to have some great Michael Waller in Rockland County. It looks like beat Ellen Jaffe, so he's going to be in the assembly. We hope Dave Catalfamo up in Saratoga Springs. The vote count favors him, we hope, going into paper and other things. I know you worked him in the Pataki administration. He'd be great in the assembly. We have Mark in the 46th. We have new assemblyman for Nicole's seat, Mike Cusick, who I worked with in Tanusis.
Right now, DeGuere's got the lead, so let's see what happens.
Yeah, there are a lot of big changes, and there's going to be some fresh blood in the assembly to make these debates the way Nicole did, and that's going to be exciting.
Well, Jim Alfano reminded us that Scott Levato's throwing his hat in the ring, and so if 2021 is anything like 2020, who knows what can happen?
If Scott runs for mayor, we will certainly have at least a visually compelling case with his arm.
It'll be the most beautiful palm cards you have ever seen.
Oh my God! They're like works of art given out at the train station.
I don't want to be that.
I know that what I'm going to say now is probably very, very biased, but I think it's very, very true. For Lisa, for Gina, for those that are disheartened, if President Trump loses, there could be no better person in Congress at this moment in time to stop the country from going too far left than Nicole Maliotakis. You're going to say, well, she's a freshman congresswoman. What can she do? But
so is AOC.
Yeah, that's right. So is AOC. So we'll leave it at that. Michael, thank you so very, very much for joining us, for unpacking all that's going on. I guess we'll talk to you again once everybody's settled in their seats in Albany and in Washington, and maybe we'll talk to you after the first 100 days of the
I am so grateful to be included. We have a wonderful working relationship. We have a wonderful friendship, and I feel every time we do this, it just deepens and becomes more authentic. And your listeners and your viewers and the folks who are going to support you in your borough president campaign, Leticia, are lucky for this platform to have the discussion. So thank you for including me.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate
everybody have a great weekend. We're going to change our schedule of the show a little bit for next week. So we'll look out for our banner, and we'll tell you who's on next. George, have a great weekend.
Bye, Leticia.